Now guys, we shall be discussing one more very important topic that is all the time asked in the MCQs, that is your anastomosis around the scapula. Okay, so we shall be discussing a topic of anastomosis around scapula. Okay, so let us discuss what are the different types of anastomosis around the scapula. Now before discussing the anastomosis around the scapula, I wanted to draw two arteries. One is the subclavian artery and the continuation of subclavian artery is your axillary artery, right? So let me draw a subclavian artery like this. Okay, and the continuation of your subclavian artery is your axillary artery, right? So within this artery there are two important arteries. One is subclavian, another one is your axillary artery. So let us say, for example, I am cutting this artery over here, right? So let me divide it. So this is the upper one is called as your subclavian artery, the lower one is called as your axillary artery. So this is your subclavian. This is your subclavian, okay? And this is your axillary artery. One is your subclavian, another one is your axillary artery. Now within your subclavian artery you have got three parts. This is the first part, this is the second part, as well as this is the third part of the subclavian artery. Now within the axillary artery also you have got three parts. This is the first part, this is the second part, and this is the third part of the axillary artery, right? So we have discussed about subclavian and axillary artery branches previously, right? So I want you to have a complete view and watch those videos first before coming to the scapular anastomosis, because it would be easy only when you watch them. Okay, so there we have discussed that the first branch of this subclavian artery, the first branch coming from the first part of subclavian artery is called as thyrocervical trunk. What is this called? This is called as thyrocervical trunk. Okay, what is this trunk called as? This is called as thyrocervical trunk. And what did I tell you there? Thyrocervical trunk gives out few branches, out of which one branch is a thyroid branch, another branch is a cervical branch. Okay, so one branch goes up like this, right? So as all of you know that this branch is called as inferior thyroid artery. Inferior thyroid artery. Okay, and another branch is cervical branch. Cervical branch means one branch goes all the way like this, transversely like this. Okay, so it means it is going transversely in the cervical region, so you call it as transverse cervical artery. Okay, this is called as transverse cervical artery. So this is how the artery goes like this. So this is your transverse cervical artery. Transverse cervical artery is going like this. Okay, so this is your transverse cervical artery. So what is this artery? This is actually called as deep branch of transverse cervical artery. Next important branch of the thyrocervical trunk is your suprascapular. Supra means on the top. So this branch comes all the way like this. It passes on to the top of the scapula like this. Okay, so this branch is called as suprascapular artery. This is called as suprascapular artery. Okay, so this is a branch of thyrocervical trunk. Now let us leave the discussion here. Now let us go to the axillary artery here. Okay, now axillary artery, the third branch of axillary artery, if you look very clearly here, the third part of axillary artery is giving a branch actually. This branch is called as subscapular artery. So we have discussed this previously itself, right? So this is called as subscapular artery. This is coming from the third part of the axillary artery. Now this subscapular artery, this is your subscapular artery, right? This subscapular artery gives out a branch like this. This branch is called as circumflex scapular artery. What is this branch? Circumflex scapular artery. Okay, so third part of axillary artery is giving subscapular artery, and one of its branches is circumflex scapular artery. Now if you look here very keenly, right, you can see anastomosis, right? Let me highlight it. You can see an anastomosis here. So this anastomosis is present between three branches. What are those branches? One is called as the deep branch of the transverse cervical artery. Next one is the suprascapular artery, and the third one is the circumflex scapular artery, which is coming from the subscapular artery. So these three branches join together to form an anastomosis. Out of these three, one branch belongs to the axillary artery. Remaining two pink color branches, they belong to the subclavian artery. So all of these three together, they join here and they form a special anastomosis here. This is one anastomosis on the surface of the scapula. Okay. Next important thing is that, look here very carefully. From the suprascapular artery, you have got a branch that is coming to, from the suprascapular artery, you have got a branch that is coming onto the top of the acromion process. So this branch is called as acromion branch of suprascapular artery. Okay, this is called acromion branch of suprascapular artery. In the same way, if you look here cleanly, from the second part of the axillary artery, you have got this branch. This is called as thoracoacromion artery. What is this branch? This is called as thoracoacromion artery. This is called as thoracoacromion artery. Okay. Now this thoracoacromion artery also gives out a branch like this. It goes onto the top of the acromion process. Okay. And this branch here is also called as an acromion branch of thoracoacromion artery. And finally, the third branch of axillary artery, as most of you know, the third branch of axillary artery gives out two branches like this. What are these two branches? One is called as anterior circumflex humeral artery. Anterior circumflex humeral artery. Another one is called as posterior circumflex humeral artery. Right? So let us say this is anterior circumflex, this is posterior circumflex. So even from the posterior circumflex also, you have got a branch like this. This is called as an acromion branch of posterior circumflex humeral artery. Okay. What is this branch? This is called as an acromion branch of posterior circumflex humeral artery. Now this acromion branch of posterior circumflex humeral artery supplies to your acromion process. So here if you look, here also you have got three branches. One is called as acromion branch of suprascapular artery, right? Acromion branch of suprascapular artery, acromion branch of thoracoacromion artery, and acromion branch of posterior circumflex humeral artery. Okay, so all these three also form the anastomosis. So this entirely is your scapular anastomosis. Okay, so let us write it down. So there are two anastomoses of the scapula, right? So what are these two anastomoses? Let us say from the axillary artery, we have got a branch, and that is called as subscapular artery. Okay, subscapular artery in turn gives a branch. This is called as circumflex scapular artery. One is called as circumflex scapular artery. Next, on the other hand, we have got the subclavian artery. Right? So one of the branch of subclavian artery is this is called as thyrocervical trunk. Okay. So from this thyrocervical trunk, one of the branches is suprascapular artery. Okay. Not only that, from this thyrocervical trunk, you have also got another branch that is called as deep branch of transverse cervical artery, right? So let me just write it as transverse cervical artery. Okay. Now, circumflex scapular artery, suprascapular artery, and transverse cervical artery, all of these three together, they form an anastomosis on the surface here. Okay. The remaining anastomosis is formed by the acromion branch. So what is this branch? Acromial branch. Here also it would be acromial branch, and the third one also will be acromial branch. Okay. So this completes the discussion of the anastomosis around the scapula.